Well, hello there, everybody. This is Brian King. Welcome to another episode of The Mindset King. I have the absolute delight and pleasure to be streaming live today with the wonderful and fantabulous Kat Trimarco, who is probably much warmer than I am here in LA. And I brought Kat to you. I've been an admirer of hers for a while because the moment I connect with her on Facebook, I knew immediately that this is a woman that is defying stereotypes. She's starting conversations. She's helping us break through our limiting beliefs about an area of our lives that is so essential, so intimate, and so interwoven into what it means to be a human being and a human being connected with another. But that's not even the most fascinating part about her. The more fascinating part is what I like to refer to as her origin story. The part of her life that was a compelling time of transformation. And there are no doubt countless lessons from her experience that we can use in our lives in order to help us embrace our vulnerabilities, embrace and discover our strength, and then leverage that to reach more of our possibilities. So let's dig in. Kat, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule today.
Yay! I think I only rescheduled on you 3 times. For us
No. Statistically speaking, is maybe like 1.75, but who's counting, right?
Right. Good. You're not counting. I'm glad.
Now, I'm not a scorekeeper. I gave up on that a long time ago. I'll leave that to my mother, but that's a different story. In any case, you in your young years, which more and more is becoming kind of an irrelevant term. There are folks out there that will like to disqualify people because their age. Oh, you're really young. You don't know yet. But considering what is now available to a lot of people these days, there's really the barrier between what is a childhood concern versus an adult concern is becoming forever blurred, because our kids can tap into so many of the things in the world, and people are growing up really, really fast. In fact, the topic that you have taken on, the subject matter as part of your livelihood, is incredibly ambitious. And the depth that you go into it, I mean, I watched one of your Facebook Lives the other day and I was blushing a little bit. But if anything, that demonstrates some of my hangups, that it's not something that I have a conversation about enough, but we'll get to that. Yeah. Before we do, just to give a little context, there was a time in your life where you had a real serious relationship with various substances. Uh-huh. But then there came a time where you just said, no more. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Yeah. Because if you read all the literature, there are people that will say, okay, I'm quitting, this is it, this is the end for me, but then they'll go back again and again. And it can be many years of struggle before they're able to be clean. But you did it in one veil swoop, like an axe, right?
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about that experience for you?
Yeah, first I really want to touch on the age thing too, because what was coming to me as you were saying that is like, I'm a spiritual coach as well as a sex coach. And it's my kind of belief or my understanding that different souls incarnate with different levels of consciousness. And so I feel like our culture and our society discredits young people who haven't been on the planet as many number of years, but it doesn't mean that their consciousness is any less evolved. And it's like we could actually learn from like kids and really, really young ones coming on to earth, because they're coming in with a heightened level of consciousness already, because they're coming in with the expansion of everything that we've already created on an energetic level already. So I always felt like, and this leads actually into me struggling with substance abuse and drugs and alcohol for so many years, because I came into this planet not feeling like it was home. I came in feeling like, where the fuck did I get dropped off, and what is going on here, and how do we function here? What is everyone doing? And I talk a lot about this in my book. It became this like just kind of looking around and trying to figure out how people are living, like even from like a level of conscious awareness of like, okay, how do we be in life? What do I do to fit in here? What do I do to be accepted? What do I do to kind of fly under the radar with everyone else, like in school and in jobs and in everything? And basically, like, I really fucking failed at that. Like, even though I would try to fit in, even though I would try to go under the radar, I just couldn't. And I mean, even if you look at me visually now, like, that's what people see a lot, but even in my visual expression, it's like I couldn't go under the radar. And what I believe happens for souls and people that come in not fitting the criteria of what our culture, what our society is saying is acceptable or what we should do, then we internalize that as like, there's something wrong with me, because it's like the inner voice in here, the inner expression that's trying to come out isn't matching what I'm seeing externally around me. And it's confusing in the level of our inner being. So we kind of go like, oh, fuck, like, who am I? Then there must be something wrong with me. If this is the way it is, and this is acceptable, what I'm seeing out here, and my inner world doesn't match what I'm seeing, then I've got to change to fit into that outer world. And I think that like a lot of people experience that on some level, and maybe just conform and accept that that's the way it is. I don't know, but I know for me it was that led to abusing drugs and alcohol, like from a really young age. Like I remember the first time I got drunk, I was like 12 or 13. And I was like, I love this. Like it took me out of this reality. It took me out of my own head and my own mind. And I could finally just like shut off. And it almost actually for me sometimes felt like I was present, even though I was on substances, because it was like all this outside noise was like quieted down. And that, I mean, it was 10 or 11 years of abusing alcohol, and then abusing drugs, using cocaine, a lot, like every multiple times a week. And it was really at the time, like my path of least resistance to what felt like surviving on this planet, of just like something to numb that discomfort of how do I be here, if that makes sense.
What you said so far is so beautiful, and I want to piggyback on it because my family has quite a neurological landscape. Mm-hmm. There's Asperger's and ADHD and depression and anxiety. And when your brain is working either faster or slower and your mood isn't quite matching your environment, and you have one of those diagnoses, mm-hmm. one of the common ways people describe that as, I feel like I'm on the wrong planet. Yeah. Kind of like you alluded to, where no matter what you do, there's always that sense that you don't quite fit. Mm-hmm. And when being in your normal state of awareness is a source of pain, mm-hmm. there are a lot of kids that gravitate towards, hey, you mean I can numb this? Mm-hmm. You mean I can have some period that it's as close to being at peace as I've ever experienced? Yeah, give me more of that. Mm-hmm. You know, I've worked with a lot of kids over the years that have various diagnoses where they find marijuana. Mm-hmm. And they get addicted to it because it's their only way of experiencing peace. Mm-hmm. The psychiatrists give them medications that make them feel like garbage because of all the side effects, but they smoke the pot, and it gives them a path to connection with some peers. Mm-hmm. So they feel like they fit in with another human being. It gives them a sense of peace within themselves. And you know, and this is not an endorsement by any means, but in their mind, it's logical to take that path because they see other people being happy, mm-hmm. enjoying themselves, feeling comfortable in their own skin. And they have no way to do that, but then they find this substance that in their mind does that.
Yeah.
Now I can be happy. Now I can be at peace because heaven forbid, I'm not going to fit into this world no matter how hard I try. So I might as well escape whenever I can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say like the root of it is we're multidimensional beings. Like we're operating on multi-levels of consciousness simultaneously, like inside of ourselves. And for me, like the solution to all of that is like waking up to the fullness of our being and allowing that to express, to fully express, which has been a lot of my personal journey. But the piece you said too about about being labeled is, I think for me, like leaving behind drugs and alcohol was so easy because I refused to identify myself as being an addict. And I was in a relationship with an addict, and the ending of our relationship and his death massively catalyzed my sobriety and the journey that I'm on now and the work that I'm doing now. But I never identified with an addict. I refused to say I'm addicted. I refused to give any sort of substance power over me. It just felt like, oh, this is helping me during the time. It's helping me numb out. It's helping me cope. But that was like the mindset behind it. And I think that that's why some people can get so stuck in addiction, because it becomes this thing then that and I saw my ex go through this, like this thing that they're then labeled with, and then that becomes a part of the identity. And then it becomes this thing that has to be battled or fixed or changed in order to shift in another direction. So like, for me, the only identity I really subscribe to is like, I'm a spiritual being. I'm an energetic being having a human experience. And I don't mean that in any sort of religious sense, but just that like, oh, I'm more than this body. I'm more than this mind. I'm more than my emotions. And therefore I don't attach to any of those things to mean anything about me. And when we can do that, then we enter like a next level ability to create and manifest in our lives, because we're not attached to the external things that either we've identified with or that other people have labeled on us and identified us as. And then we can become the creators of our reality, because then it's just playing, right? Then it's just like, well, what do I choose? And for me in that moment, even though I didn't have the words that I have now to articulate that, in that time, it was like, well, I'm choosing health. I'm choosing sobriety. I'm choosing this new path. There was no fighting against or pushing against drugs and alcohol.
Now, one thing you just said that is such a powerful reminder to people and a very essential lesson when it comes to any kind of label. And when you see the groups that you are a part of, let's look back into high school with all the cliques. You know, I'm a jock, or I'm a gifted student, or I'm in AP classes or whatever. People will subconsciously modify their behavior to prove that they deserve to be included. Mm-hmm. See, I'm one of you, I'm one of you. So when people are given any kind of a diagnosis, mm-hmm. they don't want to be outed as a fraud, mm-hmm. as an imposter. So they will modify to show that they are included. So whenever you use a label to describe yourself, you are recommitting to the limitations and the confines of that label. I have ADHD, I have autism, and I can prove it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you think of something, go ahead.
Depression, we hear that so much, and it crushes my heart and soul every time I hear someone say like, I'm depressed. Because I'm like, you don't have to be like that. Giving that label, giving that diagnosis creates and perpetuates it. You're a fucking human being. We have emotion, like a scale of our emotions internally. And it's like when we actually tune back in and pay attention to that and know how to navigate that and how that's playing out externally in our reality, that's when we become the controllers, the creators of our own life, of our own environment. So yeah, like I wish that so many more people would not accept somebody else's diagnosis of something and make it mean something about them, and then that becomes how they operate within the world. And we see it, yeah, like you said, any sort of mental diagnosis, depression, addiction, all these things, right?
And now I just want to piggyback on what Kat said there. So we're not minimizing the fact that there are some people that struggle with some depressed mood or anxiety. What we're saying here, because I have issues with depressed mood and anxiety, what we're saying though is that when you label yourself as I'm depressed, mm-hmm. I'm just an anxious person, there's also something called confirmation bias, which is where you look for information that verifies that for yourself. So it's not just about the imposter syndrome that you're trying to avoid in other people's eyes. You want to believe it for yourself. So you say, well, I do tend to be more negative, and yeah, there's plenty of things to be depressed and upset about. Yep, I'm definitely a depressed person. So you have these tendencies to prove it to yourself, want to prove it to the exterior world, and you just keep digging that hole for yourself. The more you embrace those labels, instead of embracing yourself as a human being. Because when you say you are a human being, you give yourself permission to use all of you.
Yeah,
when
and then
you say I'm Asperger's, or I'm anxious, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm whatever, you necessarily narrow your options down.
Yeah. And it becomes an experience that you move through as opposed to an identity that you attach to, right? Like I have days or moments where I feel depressed. Like I'm a human being. I run through emotions and highs and lows, and I cry and I laugh. And it's like, that is part of the human journey. It's part of the experience here. And so it's like, when we can start to reframe, and see that like, oh, this is an experience I'm moving through, and not attached to it as the identity. Everything shifts.
Amen to that. So I'm curious as how you're not identifying with the label of addict seemed to give you gave you a bigger door to walk through when you were ready to leave that. Because there is a belief out there in the, what do you want to call it, the addiction community, that you are helpless against your addiction. And there are some circles that require you to declare that you are helpless against your addiction, whereas you didn't hold that belief.
Choice, right? It's like we have to take dominion over our we choose to buy into. Like, it's all an illusion. Like, this reality, we're creating it from the inside out. And it's like that can and will be somebody's reality if they buy into it, if they choose to believe that. And that's kind of, I don't want to say the problem with certain recovery methods, but energetically, anytime that we're pushing against something, we actually include more of it in our experience. So it's not to minimize someone's suffering or the experience that they've been through or the pain that will feel very real internally, but it's like, do we want to move in the direction of a solution, or do we want to perpetuate the problem? And it's the same mentality. It's the same energetic way of being that perpetuates all war, right? Like, all war is pushing against, like, you're wrong, this thing is wrong. And in doing that, we just put more energy, more focus on it, amplify it, and make it bigger. So it's just a shift in perception. It's a shift in perspective that allows us to choose what we want to create. And I'm saying that, like, I mean, for me now, I've been sober for 5 years, and sobriety was one that was very easy for me. But there are programmings that I've bought into, or belief systems that I've bought into in my life, that do take more time and have been more challenging to shift. So I also don't want to ever, I really feel it's important to say that, because I believe that we are all here on our own journeys, and we don't ever want to compare, like, what might feel difficult to us to what someone else is doing, because it's all perfect. It's all part of our experience. But I do believe that there is an easier way, it is an easier way to shift the things we desire in our life to be more of what we want them to be, instead of staying stuck in the problem and, like, stewing and marinating in that. But definitely, I know that some people, we all have areas that are more challenging for us, and that we might have been stuck in a certain belief system or a certain thought pattern for a longer period of time, and then it becomes more challenging to shift. So I just really, like, take that in, but just know that just because sobriety was easy for me, I want that to be an example to other people that is possible, but it not to become a reason why someone might beat themselves up or make themselves wrong if it has been a challenge for them, because we're all on our own unique journeys, and it's so important to recognize that.
I'm so glad you clarified that, because one thing, it's almost like we're reverse onions. We're going through life and layers are being slapped upon us. There are the ones that we are born with, being the multidimensional beings. But then as we have experiences and we adopt new labels, we're like, okay, there's another layer. There's another label. There's something else I have to put on top of myself. Then maybe you hit addiction or some kind of a trauma or something that you identify with and make a part of your concept of who you are. That's one more layer. Now you have to do the work of identifying and peeling away those layers so that you can tap into your essential nature. Some of that might refer to that as unlearning.
Yeah.
Or simply peeling the onion. And subconsciously, we're throwing that junk on ourselves all the time. So there's a necessity of going about that constant introspective work to identify what stuff have I thrown on lately that isn't serving me? And what do I need to do to let go of it so I can get back to my essential self? Now, and we can go back and forth a little bit because I have ADHD, and flip-flopping and tangenting is kind of how I roll. But I think that kind of transitions well into the work that you do in the area of sexuality, because in terms of peeling layers, and we're not just talking clothing here, folks, okay? Being serious. Peeling layers is getting through all of those hang-ups, those biases, the prejudices that have been imposed upon you by your culture, your faith perhaps, your family beliefs, that can really stand in the way of your intimate knowing of yourself and of getting to know your partner. And a lot of the powerful work that you do is blasting through all of those stigma and helping people learn to relate to themselves in an intimate way. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
So my first question for you, Kat, is how on earth did you get into this field?
Well, that's I'm like, how do I share this without us being on here for 10 hours? I mean, that could be fun, but I honestly and I'll be really I mean, I speak really, you've watched some of my stuff. I speak really open and honestly about it publicly and online, but I was fascinated with sex from the time I was 4 years old, and I discovered masturbation and I discovered what an orgasm is. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't have a word for it. But it felt good. And I was like, holy shit, this is an amazing experience. And then it was interesting because a lot of people I'll talk to will have experiences like that of childhood masturbation and getting caught and internalizing some sort of shame or some sort of this is wrong and it's bad for me to do this. And for me, I never had that, but it was almost like an internal shaming of I know that this is wrong because even at that young of an age, it was so conditioned that sex is bad. This isn't something we talk about. It's bad to touch yourself. It's bad to look at someone. So I just had this awareness of there's something wrong with me doing this. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to be pleasuring myself. But I mean, I was fascinated with sex my whole life. And then into junior high, I mean, I started having sex really young, and it started from that place of fascination and just loving men and wanting to connect with men and experience men. But then the flip side of that was not having any education around it. So overriding my own boundaries, not knowing, not really having dominion over my own body when I was with men. And then also just no education around pleasure. Nobody was talking about this. And then I did go through experiences of being shamed and slut shamed in my school. And so it was here, this part of my being, just like how we talked about at the beginning, when the outside world doesn't match who we feel inside, it was there's this part of my being that just wanted to express in this way and experience sexual activities and feel that pleasure in my body. But then yet the external world was just telling me that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. You can't do that like that. And that was confusing. And so I just I hit a point, how I got into becoming a sex coach and actually taking this and creating a business from it and being of service to other people and helping other people discover their own sexuality was time and time again in relationship, I would come up against partners asking me what I wanted or asking me how they could make me orgasm, and I could never orgasm. And I didn't, with partners, and I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know. I'm like, it was like that. I was kind of like, I don't know, like what, we're not supposed to talk about this anywhere in life. And then all of a sudden we go into the bedroom and we're supposed to know what the fuck we're doing. And we're supposed to know our bodies, and we're supposed to actually be able to like have that intimate experience with someone and not just be going through the motions. Cause that was it. Like I experienced like deep pleasurable sex, but there was a part of it that just felt like we're going through the motions. There's no like deep communication here. And that, it frustrated me, but it sent me on a seeking journey where I was like, I really want to understand my sexuality. I really want to understand my body. And I really want to understand how I can be free in my expression. And so that led me down multiple paths of learning and like studying different sexual modalities and practicing different sexual modalities. But then eventually I became a certified erotic blueprint coach, which is a sex coach.
Wait, there's actually a training for that?
Yeah, there's lots of different trainings. So there are trainings that are, like I studied Tantra, which is more spiritual based and energetic sex. So looking at the energy of what's going on sexually as opposed to just the physicality. But then, yeah, there's different types of, like, there's sex therapy, there's sex coaching, there's sexological body work, which is more therapeutic and hands-on. So there's all sorts of different trainings. But then when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, I can actually learn this and have like the credibility or like the certificate behind my name to talk about this and to share with other people and to help other people. Yeah, so that was kind of the journey to getting here. And what we were talking about before of just like being in process is like, I really believe that we're always in process. Like that is part of the human experience. And it kind of irks me when I see leaders online or people that might portray that there's like some ultimate place to get to. Because there isn't. Like we're always in process. We're always moving to the next thing. And so my sexual exploration now is just as active and just as like mind-blowing and learning more all the time as it was then. Because it's like the onion, you talk, like there's always another layer and another layer and another layer and another layer, and I'll access like a different part of myself and I'm like, holy shit, where was that? So it's something that we're always in discovery of.
Yeah, one thing that I always encourage in my clients is to find that place of wonder.
Uh-huh.
You're living from that state and you're in that perpetual state of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool, or fascinating, that's so awesome. And the way you measure progress isn't necessarily that, okay, I've arrived. It's that you're kind of in that state of arriving. Mm-hmm. I found something new. That's fascinating. Oh, look what's over here. I found this new and this new. Mm-hmm. And as long as, like you said, you continue to peel that onion and stay fascinated with life, you don't become an old dog who can't learn new tricks. You never become bored because nothing is routine. Nothing is ordinary. Everything is always fascinating. Yeah. One thing I'm curious about your field is, I imagine you're coming up against criticisms like, well, what about safe sex? What about teenage pregnancy? What about those issues? People can't just be out there running around having free sex like they were in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So how do you respond to concerns like that?
It's such a good question. There's two pieces I want to touch on. And one, I'll answer that question first, I guess. I actually don't run up against a lot of that pushback. I do get pushback from showing up online and talking about sex and showing my body. I do get messages, I do get pushback, but I get more people being like, oh my God, I'm so inspired, or oh my God, I feel so free, or oh my God, I had this experience with my partner and we've never had that before from something I learned from you. So I get more of that than I actually do any pushback or criticism, even though there is that negative side there at times. And I really look at that as like, that's somebody else's trigger and it's their wound, and them being triggered by me, and what I do is an opportunity for them to heal a part of themselves or to explore and ask why that's so triggering inside of themselves. But I really want to clarify that to me, free sexual expression, I actually put a quote on this, like I think on Facebook and my Instagram within the last couple of weeks. And it was like, being sexually expressed doesn't mean you're out fucking everybody. Like, I spent probably, I think the longest time was like a year and a half. And all of my sexual exploration was alone. It was just learning. I was reading, I was taking courses, I was playing with my own body, learning my own sexual energy, and nobody else was involved in it. And I think that that can be to associate that being freely sexually expressed means that you have multiple partners, or that you're being promiscuous or unsafe, is like the stigma that has to go, because it's what prevented me from a time from exploring my sexuality. And when I dismantled that belief system, I was like, oh, that's bullshit. That's not true. Then I was really able to access, like, what does authentic sex mean to me? And that's why I kind of moved into the branding of like self-approved sex, because for one person that might mean having multiple sexual partners, and for another person that might mean spending 5 years exploring themselves and their own sexual energy and never bringing someone else into it. And neither is right or wrong, good or bad. It's all just like what feels aligned for me right now. And I've had both. Like, personally, I've had like very adventurous sexual experiences, threesomes, being with multiple partners at a time who were skilled in different areas. And I've gone through times where I'm completely celibate and I'm just with myself. And so for me, it's always like checking in and like, does this feel aligned for me? Does this feel like I'm going against a part of my soul, or is this really feel in alignment? And that being said, like, sometimes for myself, I also like push my own sexual boundaries, because there's learning and growth in that. So I'll come up against something that feels uncomfortable, but it's like, is this uncomfortable like unsafe, or is it uncomfortable like I'm on the edge of my own fear and I want to tip over into it? Which brings me to the other thing that I really wanted to say, that I always say, like, how we do sex is how we do life. Like, and sexual energy is life force energy. And this is what I love. If people could hear one thing in the sex conversation, that's what I would want them to hear, because it's not shameful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's how we came to be on this planet. It's life force energy. It's the same energy that the flowers are blooming from, and the same energy that we see animals, like it's so fucking natural to us. And so dismantling like all those stigmas and just like, oh, sexual energy is life force energy, can break a lot of that. And then the people, like, how we do sex is how we do life. So it's like, are you just going through the motions of sex or masturbation, not being tuned in to like what's actually happening in your body and what's actually happening in your emotions? Or are you like really tapped in? How does this feel? What is my intention? What do I want to experience? So that's kind of how I look at it.
I can see that there are so many opportunities in that, where you're talking about getting past your own boundaries, exploring intimacy with self and with others, exploring what works for you, what makes you feel most connected to yourself and your partner. When you gave the example of, okay, this was taboo, I couldn't talk about it my whole life, then suddenly we're in the bedroom and now you want to have a conversation and you want me to explain this to you and I've never developed the language for it? What the heck am I supposed to do? There's a question from somebody that's watching that's a pretty deep and powerful one. I want to read it to you. He says, I have issues connecting sexually with partners because of my surviving sex abuse. What would you suggest? He says he's currently in trauma-informed therapy, but he would like your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm hesitant to speak to trauma because I don't have any official trauma. And so I can never know like the depth of somebody's trauma and what that might trigger for them. But my belief in sex and my belief in life is that our traumas and our pains can be turned into our superpowers, and that thing that has had us feel stuck and feel broken actually can become the pathway to expansion. It can be the thing that causes us to look at a different pathway, to look at a different route, and to experience growth. So that's what I would say without having more information. Like, it's such a deep topic and it's so beautiful to go into. And I feel like most of us have sexual trauma on some level, like whether it's just internalized shame or a really apparent trauma. But yeah, I'm hesitant to speak too much specifically to trauma, because we do know people who are really well trained in that area specifically. So if anyone's looking for those kind of references, I'd be happy to outsource that. But that's like my view and my philosophy on anything that has caused us pain or caused us trauma, or felt like a bad experience can be turned into a move for good when we
one thing that you did mention, though, that I think is an extremely important point to be made, is that when you have any kind of trauma, whether it's sexual, physical, being on the recipient of child abuse or domestic violence, is to make a point of seeking experiences that counter the decisions you made about yourself from those experiences. I'm bad because this was done to me. I'm weak because this was done to me. Mm-hmm. And going through therapy, your own exploration, as you pointed out, when it comes to sexuality, or journaling, anything that gives you the insight into yourself, that opens the door to possibilities that there's more to my life than this experience. Mm-hmm. This experience was powerful. It, for the time being, has shaped who I believe I am, who I believe others to be, but I don't want that to be the entirety of my worldview.
Yeah.
I know there's more. I have to find more. I have to create more. And that's not like turning a page in a book. It can be some really intense long-term work, but it's absolutely work that I encourage people to take on for their own benefit.
Yeah. I've actually personally never been in therapy. My mom tried to put me in therapy when I was like 16 because I was drinking too much. And I sat there with my arms crossed and I was like, this motherfucking bitch is not going to tell me what to do. And I did go for therapy probably like 6 or 7 years ago for a couple of sessions. And it never resonated with me because I felt like the energy in there was, there's something wrong with you that needs fixing. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. That's a dynamic that we bought into in the human experience that isn't fucking true. And if we buy into that, we just keep perpetuating it. And in truth, it's like the problem, the thing that you feel like is fucked up and broken about you actually is your purpose. It is the path to what you're supposed to be doing in this world, to who you're supposed to be, when you can reframe it that way. And it doesn't even have to be a long drawn out process of going into the past and digging into the pain. It's like the contrast, the opposite. It's like, what is the opposite of that thing that you want to experience? Where do you want to move into? And I think that that's where people get stuck in therapy for like 10 or 15 years and nothing really shifts. Nothing really changes because they're going in there as this broken person that needs fixing and needs healing, and all these things have to be shifted and tweaked. And it's like, that's not actually going to energetically move you towards what you're desiring. And so this isn't to bash therapy, but that's been my experience of the dynamic. And it's like that, for example, it's like, abusing drugs and alcohol was my greatest gift because the opposite of that propelled me on this journey of seeking. My inability to know myself sexually and to feel like I had no tools to communicate that to partners, and my inability to orgasm with partners, what seemed like what was broken about me. I thought I was sexually broken for so long. I'm like, why can't I orgasm? became what propelled me in the direction of seeking. So instead of trying to fix my brokenness of not being able to orgasm, I propelled into exploring sex and exploring different things. And now I consider myself to have like sexual superpowers in a sense, because I've tapped into the deeper layers of energy within sex that I never would have accessed if I was orgasming all the time with partners, because there would have been no catalyst to seek that. There would have been no catalyst to seek those deeper truths and those deeper layers. So that's how I like to reframe all like problems or issues or things that feel like this thing happened to me. It's like, no, this is the human experience. All those things are moving us exactly where into our greatest expansion and into our greatest expression, but it's a choice in how we choose to see it. So it's shifting that perspective, even of like something bad happened to me. Like I could easily say in my own journey that like something bad happened to me. I was abusing drugs and alcohol. I lost a relationship, and that person that I loved OD'd and died. And it could have been the thing that took me down. It could have been the thing that was like, oh, fuck, this happened to me. But I never viewed it as that. I went into moments of that for sure. But I overall viewed it as like, this is propelling me into everything that I'm supposed to be doing in the world. And we all have that choice. It isn't past any of us. It's what we choose to do with it. It's how we choose to frame and perceive the things that seemingly happen in our life. And that to me is like true empowerment. It's true freedom in the human experience, because we can't change the past except if we can change how we view it and our perception of it in the now.
Oh, I'm not going to accuse you for one moment of being an inside or outside the box thinker, because you have flipping obliterated the box. And I appreciate that. And one of the biggest takeaways of this conversation for me is your reinforcement of the idea that you can see it as an obstacle or an opportunity. Mm-hmm. That whether it's sexuality, whether it's drug addiction, you can say, oh, I'm so ashamed of that part of my life or that part of myself. Instead, you said, the fact that I've gone through this experience, that I've had this experience, what opportunity do I have now at this point in time? I have the opportunity to choose sobriety. I have the opportunity to explore my sexuality at a deeper level. I have an opportunity to question this stigma and peel away this layer of the onion to understand myself at a fuller, deeper level. So that's one of the big things that I hope that people that are listening take away from this, because you've used some adult language, some that's unfamiliar, like you said, people's triggers. Now, some people can listen and say, oh, I can't believe she's talking like that. It's so unladylike. It's so inappropriate. Get over it. Yeah. That's my advice. Whenever you have your feathers ruffled, that's your opportunity. Yeah. Instead of being upset about the strong language and the topic matter, ask yourself, what opportunity does this give me to examine something in myself that is very likely holding me back significantly from expressing and experience myself on a fully human level? And what is Kat's contact information so I can follow up and thank her profusely for triggering that part of me that allowed me to investigate it and peel back the onion and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I talk in my first book, Self-Approved, that like our greatest guides in our life are the things that really, really inspire us, or the people that we really like look up to and we're like, oh, because they're reflecting an unexpressed part of us. They're expressing a part of us that wants to come out and be who we are. And then also our deepest triggers, like the people that we're just like, who the fuck does she think she is? Or who the fuck does he think he is? And it's funny because like I have a mentor right now, like a business coach and a spiritual coach. And she used to do that for me. Like she used to trigger me to the point that I would like unfollow her a bunch of times. I was like, I can't believe how she's speaking online and how bold she is and all these things. And like, but there was also something like magnetic about her that just kept drawing me in. And like a year later, I ended up hiring her because I so believe in what she's saying. So yeah, it's interesting because like even hearing you say like, oh, the bold language or the like obliterating the box. And in my mind, in my consciousness, I'm like, I'm just being me. Like in my, or, and I, it's interesting. I had some, I mean, I have this a lot with my looks and how I visually look, but one specific experience stands out to me. And that's, someone said something about the way I look or the way I like, wow, like, cause there's so much pink and there's so much going on. I'm like, you must just like, are you trying to make a statement, or like people must just like see you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm on the inside of this. Like, I am the being in this body that is looking out. That's who I am. And that's who we all are. And if we can remember that when we're speaking to anybody, when we're interacting with anybody, that we might see an external vision. I can see your face on this screen, but I know that there is a being beneath the surface level of your skin, beneath the surface of your body, that has real feelings, real emotions, all the things, thoughts. There's a whole world of an inner environment going on. And we forget that when we look at people. We forget that when we communicate with people, when we see them as this outer shell, instead of feeling them, instead of opening our hearts and connecting with someone on that level. And so when people say things like that to me, and I get both, like I get like extremes on that end of like, whoa, like you're so out there. And then I get extremes on the end of like, you inspire me so much and you're so beautiful. And either is hard for me to see sometimes, because I'm like, I'm just me in this body being this being that I came here to be. And it's not my responsibility how people respond, whether it's negative or positive. And I believe we all have that mission. We all have that purpose to come home to that inner place, to come home to that inner environment, to remember who we are, and to remember that every single other person we ever interact with is a being of their own. And that is the ultimate freedom in this experience on earth, is to be in that inner environment and be authentic with it and let it come out and let it express. And it brings me to a quick little, I know we're probably coming to the end here, but just when I got into sex coaching, and I was so excited about it because I found this program, and I was calling my mom and I was telling her about it. I was telling my friends about it. I'm like becoming a sex coach, and I'm like telling them all these things I'm learning. And I had some lashback, and a friend said, you can't just talk about sex, or you can't just do this. And my mom actually said to me, she said, who are you to deny what your soul came here to express? Who are you to deny what is trying to come through you in this world? And we all have that. We all have that thing inside that wants to be expressed. And the thing is will we allow it? Will we let it come out?
Dang, what a cool mom.
Yeah.
So Kat, tell these wonderful people how they can find you and follow your beautiful work.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social medias like Facebook and Instagram as Kat Trimarco, so K-A-T space T-R-I-M-A-R-C-O. My website is www.kattrimarco.com for all like my coaching services and programs. And then Instagram is at KAT_TRIMARCO.
Kat, this conversation has blown me away and exceeded my expectations. I mean, I thought you were awesome before, but having this opportunity to explore things on a deeper level has been wonderful. And I hope that those watching us live on Facebook and those listening on iTunes get the same value from it, or even more than I did. So Kat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Brian. It's such a pleasure being here.
And everybody watching or listening, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of The Mindset King. If there's anybody with hangups that you know can benefit from this, or somebody that you just want to see the look on their face, you know, it's entirely up to you. But either way, please share it, because Kat's doing some very important work at helping us break through those limitations, and the world deserves to know more about her. So share away, and please continue to listen or watch The Mindset King. Until we talk again, this has been Brian. Thanks for being you.